And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in our latest session of Growing Pains, a series of quick firesides with leaders all across Asia sharing their stories, their learnings, their insights on developing people managers at hypergrowth companies all across the region. The goals of these sessions is to give you bite-sized perspectives and real-life insights so that you can make an impact tomorrow for your organization today. Today's guest is Angus Thorn. He's the VP of Trust and Safety, as well as the Business Information Security Officer at Bukalapak, one of the largest e-commerce unicorns in Indonesia. Angus, I'm very thrilled to have you with here today, where we'll be diving into the topic of scaling culture and finding your fit. I'm excited to hear about you and your experiences. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.
Angus, you've recently moved to a new role. Talk to me about that journey and how you found that story for you to join Bukalapak. What are you currently doing there?
Sure. So I come from a technical cybersecurity background, having cut my teeth at Australian intelligence and defence. Did that for a number of years and then made my way to Singapore, where I joined a cybersecurity startup and was doing more cybersecurity consulting for many organisations and startups here in Asia. Throughout that process, I made my way into a leadership role where I was managing up to 30 consultants around the region. And that was fun. High growth startup, learned a lot, obviously. And then I guess the opportunity came for a bit of a change. I'd been doing cybersecurity for 15 years and kind of wanted to explore something different. And Booker approached me with his trust and safety role, which is more fraud orientated, and making sure that we're limiting the amount of fraud inside our application and our platform, but also instilling a sense of trust, and so that users are willing to use our platform to transact. So that's ultimately my role right now, is to limit fraud and increase trust overall of the platform as it grows.
So as, in more layman's terms, tell me a bit about the whole cybersecurity landscape. How has that evolved in your journey? Being in Asia and looking to emerging markets across the region, why is that big? Why is that a thing now?
Sure. I think it was really interesting, the move to Singapore. We joked around saying it was kind of like moving back to the 80s in terms of cybersecurity. So 4 years ago, cybersecurity wasn't a big thing in Singapore, for example, or Asia in general. And it was quite a niche field, but quite immature in the way that they saw holistic cybersecurity. I remember coming, and essentially cybersecurity meant pen testing. So just making sure your apps were secure to some degree. Obviously, that's changed a lot in 4 years, and cybersecurity has become the forefront of Singapore's agenda. And you've seen that massive increase, I guess, in awareness. What that's meant is you've seen this industry grow over 4 years quite rapidly. And you see people and organizations starting to take cybersecurity more seriously. Which has been fantastic. It's kind of like that you're at the start of the wave and you've just been riding this cybersecurity wave in through to Asia. What I think is interesting about Southeast Asia in particular is, I would say Singapore, Hong Kong are like forefront of cybersecurity because of government pressure around regulation. Other countries are catching up and they're starting to see their governments apply regulation and therefore taking cybersecurity more seriously. And I think that's a good thing for everyone long term. So.
When you think about being part of this new wave, Angus, and I think in Southeast Asia, there's been so many inflection points in e-commerce, in fintech, in this case, cybersecurity, of the crypto waves. How do you think about yourself as a leader being at that forefront? What are some of the challenges that you personally face in terms of educating the market or, grooming the next generation of talent? How do you kind of find your fit in this new world?
Sure. It's been a very interesting learning curve, I think. As I say, like when I first joined 4 years ago in Asia, we would have interns coming to us from a computer science degree, and their friends would make fun of them because they weren't doing a serious degree at university. And cybersecurity wasn't a profession. Like you weren't being a doctor or a lawyer, so therefore you were wasting your time. And I found that remarkable, hearing that from young kids. But then you'd go back into the market and you'd be advising these organizations around security, and they'd be, well, we bought a firewall, so we're secure. And you're like, this is a singular point of a massive scope of cybersecurity that you're relying on to be secure. And obviously you're not. And so we, I think, as the company, had to go through this whole educational piece to the market and say, this is what cybersecurity actually means. Like, you may be sold a piece of hardware, but you're not protected against so many other things. So what I found really fascinating was, and exciting, I guess, is you're going to a startup, they're doing, say, fintech, they're small, they don't have much money. They're being told to follow these regulations from government, which are normally pushed by banking. So you would need a massive budget to comply. How does a 10-man team in a fintech comply to these massive regulations? And then you have to start thinking outside the box of how best that startup can implement some of this stuff. And that gets really exciting because you're kind of problem shooting, and you're using all this experience you have behind you to kind of make it more niche that these startups can apply these regulations in the way they need to.
Tell me a bit about how you've thought about building the team. Obviously, you came in as a specialist. You had a history in the security space, in the public sector, but as you switched gears into Horangi, into the startup world, how did you need to shift your positioning for your team? How do you think about the type of culture and mindset that you wanted to build from the ground up?
Yeah, I came in as a purist. So for me, if you weren't secure, you weren't secure. So it was security at any cost. I quickly found out from startup world that business is a reality. So can I be secure to my budget, or can I be secure to the regulation? And what that meant was that when I was trying to hire people, they're coming in with the same mindset of, you have to be 100% secure, you have to 100% do this, 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 and this, and kind of instilling, well, no, we need to do what we can with inside these buckets of what we can do. When I moved into more of a leadership role, I'm a very people first leader. So I'm the kind of person that kind of tries to understand what it is that excites you about technology, because you're in this technology space. There's a reason that you do it. What's that thing that excites you? And a lot of people, it's that innovation, it's the building, it's the forefront of building the next thing, or being the first into a technology. And so trying to instill this culture of, it's instilling that culture of passion, and my role is to enable that passion, if you will. So it's understanding where the people want to get to and supplying them with that path, not removing the blockers so that they can do their job, but also give them the tooling and the training so that they can grow over the time as well. I think as a new manager, I was also very, very convinced that someone had to stay with me for like 10 years. Like, you're going to be my employee for the next 10 years. And then realizing, well, I'd moved roles every 3 years. So what makes me think that these people are going to stay with me for so long? And then having that mindset of, okay, so you've joined me, I may get you for 3 years. I want you to leave better than when you joined. So what does that 3 years with me look like? What does the after that 3 years look like? And how do we get you to that role that you've been dreaming of doing?
Yeah, I think when we first met, Angus, you talked a lot about having the honest tour of duty conversations, especially when people of different cultures, different perspectives have drive. Tell me a bit about your work leading teams across the region. Obviously, the cybersecurity talent is hard to come across, which is why I'm assuming you had to be quite resourceful with identifying who to work with. Tell me a bit about how that journey has evolved for you.
Yeah, it's been a really big learning curve. Obviously, you come to Asia and there's multiple cultures very close together. The reality is it is that, but it's, for me, it was more. It wasn't necessarily multiple cultures, but multiple working styles and what's important to them in their lives. So, for example, we had a team in Hong Kong who would come in on the weekends happily and work 16 hours. For me, I never wanted them to coming in on the weekend, but that was something that they, throughout their careers, had been doing. So they felt fine doing this. And then I had a team in Indonesia that's very family first and very religious first. So allowing them to have the time to do that like do their work, their home life over their work life, for example, and not trying to instill this singular pressure on everybody to act the same. And then also identifying where those strengths are. So, using the same example, in Hong Kong, the quality of the reports that people were writing were far better than everyone else. They would really invest their time and effort to make sure these reports were perfect. But then in Indonesia, you would have a culture of sharing. So every Friday afternoon, they would stop work, they would sit down and they'd share something new they'd learned that week with the team. Now, both of those is really good things to have in a team. So how do you then combine all this together? And I don't know if I was successful at it, but what I was doing was saying, I've seen this work for this team. How about we try and apply that across the board? And so we would start doing sharing sessions on Fridays, for example, or we'd start sharing reports to the whole team so they could see the quality and things like this. Um, and just trying to instill this. Everyone is working differently, and that's totally fine. Everyone has strengths, so let's try and work out what these strengths look like and see if we can apply it across the board.
I think it's very common now for team leaders to have different functions and different parts of their team scattered across the region. Going deep into that example, Angus, what were some of the challenges that came out? Because obviously you have the performance KPIs that you need to deal with, but also culturally, what does that blend, and how did you what were some of your roadblocks that you came across? How did you look at fixing it or challenging it?
So I think fundamentally, when you're headquartered, say in Singapore, and then you have remote teams, how do you instill this culture of one? How do you instill this culture of you may be remote, but you're part of my team? Now that became very difficult during COVID because I couldn't travel to these countries and still be there with them. But pre-COVID, there was periods of time where, say for Indonesia, I would spend 2 or 3 days a week for a few months going to Indonesia and making sure that I was there with the team, just to break down some of these boundaries as well, because there's a cultural element of the boss, and I don't like being the boss. I want to make everyone feel comfortable around me so that they can talk and so they can be open and they can share their dreams with me so that I can, as I said before, plan their journeys for them. So what I was doing prior was going to each country and spending time with my consultants, making sure that they could see my face, realize that they can talk quite openly with me, and breaking down some of these boundaries. In Thailand, in particular, there's this case of never mentioning anything negative. And so for every time I would have a one-on-one with my Thai colleagues, it'd be everything's fine, everything's fine. And next minute, someone would leave. And you'd have zero idea that they're about to do this. So what I found by going out for dinner, being more sociable, they'd be a lot more open in their feedback of how they see me as their leader. And it became quite obvious that I wasn't spending enough time on remote, say, Zoom calls with them to try and make them making them feel more part of the team. And so I spent a lot of time, I guess, investing in one-on-ones, for example. We had a company derivative of you should be meeting your team once a month. I was meeting with people once a week, for example, just to try and get this cadence going of communication. We also had this culture of communicating over Slack. Slack is good, but leaves room for miscommunication. And so having this mindset of, okay, we're having an in-depth conversation. Let's set up a Zoom call. Let's have a face-to-face conversation, video on, so I can see your body language and understand that you may be typing angry, but you're actually not angry, and making sure that there's no miscommunication. And I think that was probably the hardest part. Obviously, also you're dealing with different languages and different skills in English because we operated in English. How do you then allow someone the time and give them the confidence to speak their mind, but also speak in general? We have this issue right now with my team where I think about 50%, because my team's based in Indonesia, 50% don't have a confidence in speaking English, for example. And so a conversation with me is very limited. But I give them the time and I'll say, you have 30 minutes. Let's talk about anything. It may take someone 30 minutes to construct a sentence, but that's totally fine for me. I'm willing to put in this time because I see that there's a strong value in doing so. We're also now looking at, in the Bukalapak context, we operate business in English. So how do I get my young employees up to a confidence where they can have a conversation in English, a technical conversation in English, so that other business units can understand what they're saying? So it's just about promoting and building up these consultants or these employees in a way that they have these confidence to speak their mind. Because I had early in my career as a leader, I wanted to be the nice guy. I never wanted to give feedback. I never hated giving negative feedback, but it bit me a few times where I wouldn't give this feedback, and later on it would come back that this person would misbehave because they're taking advantage of my niceness. And so I actually read the book Radical Candor, where it talks about addressing issues there and then, but also doing it in a way that's constructive. And so I've been pushing this heavily ever since, because I do believe in this openness of communication, and I promote communication back to myself as well from employees. It's not a one-way street.
When you think of books like Radical Candor and having open, transparent conversations, that's obviously written in the context of the Western world.
For sure.
But when you're working with teams in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Thailand, the English barrier is actually a significant challenge, and we see this as well when we have learners coming in from different parts of the region. How do you see that whole business English piece, evolving? And I can also see from their side, these companies, these young managers, these young leaders are trying to globalize too. But do you think that there needs to be a bit of a stepping stone in between? How do you think about that?
I think there does. I think there needs to be an acceptance that, particularly in the feedback context, there needs to be an acceptance that feedback is okay. So you need to kind of instill this culture of everyone having your leadership give open feedback in front of everyone, so that they can see that my leaders can challenge me and that I can challenge them, and see that that's okay. Because I guess when it comes to language, it's more only about confidence in speaking the language. As I say, most of my team can speak English. It's just whether they're confident enough to do so. And so what I try and instill in the leadership in my team essentially is challenging them on all meeting calls, not in a negative way. It's just showing that it can be done, and vice versa, having them challenge me, which you kind of have to beg them to do. It's kind of like, please challenge me in this context. I'm going to say this thing. You can kind of stage it in many ways of I'm going to give you an example. I want you to challenge me, and I want you to shut me down and say, this isn't the right thing we should be doing. To give that example to the younger employees, it's okay. But then also in the Indonesian context, it's making a decision. It's having the permission to make decisions, for example. So one thing that I see right now is a lot of times my younger employees are waiting to be told what to do. They want their list of things to do. And when there's a problem, they'll present me with 3 problems, but not necessarily suggest which one they suggest. And so we're actually running this exercise now with my team where I'm like, if you please bring me the problems that you face, but then also suggest a solution and tell me why you think this is the best thing. Now, in my role, I may have more breadth in the organization to understand why something you may have missed. But 9 times out of 10, you're the subject matter expert. I don't understand the subject as well as you do. So a solution is probably going to be the best one moving forwards. And so what we're now doing with the leadership is that kind of style, and then asking them to do that with their reports as well. I'm not sure how well that's going to go with their reports, but it's that ever evolving lesson of how can you get everyone communicating well, and the challenge, I guess, that goes with that.
I think it's also why you've been invited to kind of lead the team. And we talked a lot, previously in the roundtables and our earlier catch-ups around you bringing a different type of style and flavor to the table.
Sure.
When you think about your personal milestones in leading, this new team, taking on the Indonesian markets, what are some of the stepping stones that you're hoping to achieve in the next 1 month, 3 months, 6 months? What does that look like for you?
For sure. I think my team is a very operational team, so they're very used to reacting to a situation. What I'm trying to do is mature that team into thinking more about, this has occurred, how do we stop it in the future? What kind of information can we give back to the business? Now, they haven't felt that they can supply feedback to the business. It kind of goes with that example of challenging and suggesting solutions. I need my team to be doing that internally. So that's kind of what I'm trying to work on right now, is giving people the confidence that you are the subject matter expert. You do know this subject the best. You may not understand how a different business unit is going to use that information. So have that conversation, understand their priorities, and then try and adjust your priorities to meet those priorities. Because again, it comes down to this context of early day cybersecurity, everything has to be perfect. But that's coming from me. That's not understanding, say, from marketing. That's not an option. I need some flexibility in the way that I work. So it's having that conversation with the marketing team and saying, these are my priorities. This is my restrictions. How can we do what you want inside that? And having that open conversation with the two teams and making sure that they're understanding each other's priorities, but then also, I guess, restrictions in how we have to do, because we're looking at we don't want fraud. The business may want to relax some things to allow users to come in. So how do we negotiate and work around those kind of problems?
Final question from my side, Angus. We're going to holiday season. You have the new year, you have Christmas. About using that as an opportunity to, further build trust, with your team, especially when it's, going to be festive season.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I missed the middle part of that question that broke up.
It's all good. So we're going to the festive season now with Christmas, it's New Year's, Chinese New Year.
Mm-hmm.
How are you thinking about using this as an opportunity to, see the fun side of your team and show a bit more color in your personality?
Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, because I am having an Indonesian team. They're all religious in their way. Christmas isn't a thing. Being in Singapore and my family being in Australia, Christmas to me is a smaller event. So for me, it's promoting this downtime. It's that relaxing time. To be honest, since I joined, I've kind of pushed the team a lot because I'm trying to see where the boundaries of how far I can push them is. So just giving this time to step back and relax. As travel opens, it's allowing time for travel. Obviously, in the new year, when Indonesia opens up, I'll go over and I'll meet my team for the first time. It's having this, as I say, this downtime, but then also this family time and making sure that everyone's looking after themselves mentally as well.
I think it's so important to not only be able to push the boundaries, but allow people to have that reflection moment, not
For
just
sure.
as an individual, but as a team. Angus, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you everyone for tuning in. As always, we're going to be sending a summary of our learnings over email soon. So if you have any questions or you're interested in connecting, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or over email at hello@newcampus.co. Have a great evening. Angus, thanks so much for your time and we'll catch you on the other side. Bye for now.
Cheers.
Ciao.